Thank you very much. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for being here. I hope I will not make you fall asleep in this last session. So I'm Giulia, and today I want to talk a bit about a topic that I think has been touched upon during these last days for many species, and which is large carnivores' attacks on humans. Probably the most dramatic and most serious kind of conflict with wildlife. And I'm going to present you a very few, because we don't have the time, results of this project that we have carried out recently, where we wanted to give a global perspective on the issue. First of all, why should we study these events? Probably many of you know that are very rare. They are super difficult to collect, to interpret, to analyze. There's a lot of challenge going on while analyzing this data, but they are also super important for human-wildlife coexistence, as you know. I will not touch the human safety part, which is huge, but let's think about just only the large carnivore conservation and the consequences that they have. Once one attack happened, usually one or more individuals of the species are removed from the population. The species become target of human persecution, and these attacks generate fear and low acceptance by the local communities. So I think it's a crucial topic that we have to study more, we have to talk about more and more. And there are a number of studies that have addressed this topic mainly at the local level, and focusing on one species or more species. And these are super important because they can investigate causes, factors, and also find effective solution at the local scale. So why a global study? Probably many of you here are expert in the local large carnivores and pattern of attacks, so probably I'm the least expert here on this topic, but we always have something to learn, right? As this conference teaches us, sometimes we focus too much on our area, our study area, our species, and it's also good to sometimes take a step back and say, okay, we have an issue, I have a problem, maybe I can cooperate with other areas, I can see what other people are doing to address this issue, and also learn things from other places and other species. Also, with this global work, we hope to stimulate more data collection and better sharing, which was a huge challenge of this project. And last but not least, support communication, because what we have done is collect data and publish data, but also literature that we have put together in one paper to facilitate also communication on this topic. So this is the project. It was a project of my PhD, which ended actually 3 years ago already. And we have started with the smaller scale and smaller focused areas. We have published a few papers on the topic. But I want to focus today on the last one that was actually published 1 month ago, approximately, where we try to summarize all the results that we and many other experts got from their research at a global scale. What? No, wait, back. Yeah, here. So we have focused on some species, first of all, mammal, large carnivores, and terrestrial, to restrict a bit the area of study, and there are already a lot of species to put together. And so the main species we have focused on, which are also the mammalian and terrestrial large carnivores that are mainly involved in this kind of conflicts, are 12 species in particular. And we have covered a time span of 70 years. So we managed to collect over 5,000 cases of attacks on humans, and we have put together more than 100 publications, like reports, research papers that talk about this topic. Main results. So what came out of this study is really a huge complexity. It's okay, like we cannot generalize anything. Every context is different from the other. Every species is different from the others. So it's also very difficult to explain today also all the results. I will present you just a very few, then I'm happy to discuss it later. For instance, we have analyzed circumstances of attacks and scenarios, so what could be a motivation that could trigger attacks, and we have compared them among group of species and species across areas and different stuff. So this is just one example of one group of species that we have investigated, and it's bears. And basically what we found is that mainly all the 5 species that are mainly involved in these attacks for defensive reason, and this is quite homogeneously distributed across the bear area. So these are the main scenarios that can trigger attacks, and but this, like the same, is not it's not the same with felids, for example. If we look at them, like the main attack scenario that we found was the predatory one, and predatory one means that the felid wanted to eat the person, which is like kind of most dangerous and most unpredictable kind of scenario. But what's interesting here is that which introduced also another part of the study, is that these predatory attacks were mainly concentrated in a few areas, and also sometimes time spans. So this scenario was not distributed equally across the distribution of these species. So we had, and now let me show you this. With some areas, and most of the distribution of these species, lion, tigers, leopards, where there are very few attacks, they are mainly defensive reactions. And then we have some hotspots where predatory attacks concentrated, and we have a lot of attacks, a lot of predatory attacks, which are also the most lethal of attacks. We have also found the importance of human context, as you can all imagine, and also, as you saw from the scenario, the human context is super important. So even in the same species, let's think about the tiger or the lion, scenarios of attacks and circumstances vary greatly among areas, but mainly because of the human context, the socio-economic context, how we use the land, how we overlap our activities with these large carnivores. So this is super important. And now I don't have the time, unfortunately, to explain all of this, but I think we can come up with a few considerations globally, and of course trying to generalize as much as possible, because we can't go into detail of all the contexts. But we found a kind of 2 coexistence scenarios where, let's think about high-income countries. We call it like that for like it's easier. Let's think about, for instance, North America, some places of Europe. In these places, we found that people that are mainly engaged in these conflicts are doing recreational activities. They are people that go to natural areas to recreate for camping, hiking, whatever kind of recreational activities. They usually go by choice or live there by choice. And scenarios are mainly defensive, as we've seen before. Also, bears are the species that are many times involved in these attacks in these areas. What we have found is that there are some behaviors that we can consider high-risk behaviors from humans. So in this context, this much more maybe a provocation, but because we are going to see the other scenario, probably it's easier also to reduce the risk of this kind of attack. We have some target categories of people that we could work on. We have some target human behaviors that we can try to change by education and communication campaign. And then we have the second scenario, which is much more complex, which is areas of low-income countries where people that are engaged with this kind of conflict, but we have seen all through this conference that is the same for any kind of conflict. People that just live their lives and they're doing any kind of working activities, working in agriculture, livestock grazing, and going to the forest for any kind of work. And these are the people that are involved in attacks by large carnivores. And here we have seen before that we find also the predatory attack hotspots, which are very frequent, and they are the more lethal. So here the problem is much more difficult. Like I think it's a huge challenge that needs to be addressed carefully. But I think we have talked about this also through the conference on how to deal with human-wildlife conflicts also in these areas. I don't know if I have more time. Yeah, but I will close. There are too many things to say. I just wanted to thank all the people. Of course, this has been a huge teamwork, and these are only the authors, co-authors of the papers we have produced. And then there are so many other contributors that we have acknowledged in the paper. So I was just collecting all the data and putting them together, but this is just a huge work and took so long. So I think, I'm going to finish here, and thank you very much.
Thank you. I guess this is a summary of very complex information. So we have time for maybe 3 questions or even more. Can you help me? First, in the back.
Can you raise your hand, please? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very interesting. I was just curious if you noticed a specific group of attacks that was more prominent in the canids.
To the canids, yeah. So canids, we have included wolves and coyotes. Coyotes are not even large carnivores. And I have an extra slide here. We have also some of the papers we have published before were really focused on coyote cases, which in North America, as you probably know, it's an issue in some areas. So for wolves, it's a huge diversity of scenarios, as you probably know. Like India is one context where you also have many predatory attacks hotspots, but in North America and Europe they are mostly food conditions, wolves that so become habituated to people and do not fear people anymore. With coyotes, it's a big problem. There are so many papers published on this, and it also become a problem in urban areas. Where they can also attack children because they start to prey on dogs and pets, and so it can be a problem. This is the graph for canid scenarios.
Thank you, very interesting. I was wondering if you analyzed, I guess you did, some temporal trends, and if they differ in the 2 scenarios that you showed us, in the high-income and low-income areas?
So mainly it's an increase everywhere, but especially in low-income countries. And I guess that is related to also a huge growth of human populations as well. And not only human population, but overlap with the landscape, like more agriculture, more livestock grazing, and it's a consequence. But yeah.
More questions?
So maybe are there any thing that can apply to most species, to people? So what could we do to feel safe when we go to nature? Okay. And could apply to different parts of the world?
Okay, good question. There are many practical things that we can do, but they mostly depend also on the species we are talking about. for instance, if we look at the bears, where most attacks are defensive, and in general, we're also seeing for felids, like most attacks are defensive apart from this hotspot. But I'm more expert on the bears, actually. So yeah, there are a series of behaviors that we can take, of course, when we go out to the nature. So make ourselves notice from the bear, because most of the time, and this is true for brown bears, sloth bears, and I think it's quite interesting that it's common for all the species of bears. Is people that go in the forest and they are very silent. Maybe they go out of the trails where the bears know that we are. And we surprise them at close distances, so they react aggressively, and this is probably the main cause of interaction, aggressive interaction. Then, of course, each species has its own behaviors. But
let's give an applause.